Welcome back to One on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show. I'm Chris Persianen, alongside Chris Carino, welcoming in an incredibly special guest in what is, I think, his prime time of the year to come here on One on One and give us some special insight. We have ESPN's Rich Cimini with us, who has just been, and not today, but will be back at Jets training camp, observing all the minutia, everything he breaks down on Twitter and in his pieces and work that we appreciate here at WFUV for keeping us in tune with Gang Green. Rich, thank you so much for joining us here on One on One. How are you?
Oh, it's my pleasure, Chris. It works out great. It's an off day. I love talking Jets, and you guys do a great job. So let's talk Jets.
Love it. Well, Rich, I'm going to start you off with something that has nothing to do with the field, but has a very big part, in my opinion, to do with the potential championship level resolve of these airliners here. Let's talk Hard Knocks. Let's get this out the way.
Okay, let's do
I
it.
got to ask you about Hard Knocks. A lot of Jets fans, particularly that, call in and talk to us here at WFUV, not very happy about the prospect of Hard Knocks. Now, I know everyone loves that inside look at their favorite team, but Hard Knocks has this juju around it that it's a distraction, that it puts all your issues on blast. What was the Quinnen Williams extension hurried up because they didn't want that to make it into the show? From your assessment, do you think it's affected the team at all? How do you think they're dealing with it? Does the veteran leadership of a Rodgers coming in just help them kind of tune things out and stay focused on the goal?
Well, I can tell you that it had nothing to do with the Quinnen Williams situation. That was a separate entity unto itself. So that was going to get done no matter what. But yeah, it's a distraction because everywhere you go in training camp, there's a ton of cameras out there. The press conferences all over the field. You see boom. I've seen more boom mics this summer than I've ever seen. So I was around it in 2010 when Hard Knocks was out there. That team back in 2010 really embraced it. That was their personality. This team's a little more buttoned down. As a football fan, as someone who likes good entertainment on TV, I like it a lot. The players, I haven't heard any bad. A couple of players were kind of dismissive when asked about Hard Knocks, but Rodgers seems to be embracing it. Salah's kind of grinning and bearing it. And so I think they're making the best out of it. You're not going to see any deep, dark secrets revealed on Hard Knocks because the Jets have editorial control. So nothing will get out that they don't want to get out.
Yeah, and you kind of talked about Rich and just touched on that 2010 team there just for a second. And kind of when I look at these teams, I mean, obviously you said there's a bit of a difference in these two teams, but kind of at their core, they're both very much of that New York grit kind of, portrayal. And do you think that, with all your time in the league, in football specifically, there's a sense of kind of parity that comes with the successful teams and kind of their identity and kind of the image that they try to portray for themselves?
That's a really good question. And it's going to make me think for a second here, which is what good questions should do. And, every team has their own identity. I think this team is still building its identity. I think the identity is going to be based around Aaron Rodgers. Let's face it. I mean, he is everything around the team. He is the leader, the quarterback. He's like the co-offensive coordinator. Some people think he might be like the head coach from watching Hard Knocks. I don't agree with that narrative, but so that's going to be the Jets' narrative identity this year. Back in 2010, it was very much a Rex Ryan team. The loose cannon nature of Rex, the F bombs,
Go eat a goddamn
the,
snack, the whole, yeah.
yeah, all that stuff. It was totally Rex unfiltered. That's who Rex was and is. And Mike Westhoff, you recall, the special teams coach, he was hilarious in that episode, those few episodes. But that's who he is, a snarky, hard ass type of coach, sarcastic. But that's who he is. That team very much relished that spotlight. This team, I think maybe their personalities will come out a little more in the next few episodes, but I get the sense that they're holding back a little bit, just feeling it out. So this team identity has not formed yet. That this is what training camp's about.
Absolutely. This is when you got to kind of look in the mirror and figure out what you see, what you want to see as
Yeah.
well. Right now, the Jets are looking at a mirror in their running back room that has a lot of faces in it, and potentially someone peering in through that door on the side. Rich, talk to us. I mean, you've got Brees Hall returning. He's a stud, and he put up incredible production when healthy. But between Izzy, Zonovan, first of all, awesome names in this Jets running back room. Some of the
Yeah.
coolest, some of the
And Michael
coolest
Carter is
athlete.
kind of a normal name, but yeah, Izzy and the Bam Knight, good names.
So between Avanikonda and Knight, do you think this running back room, from the organizational perspective, has it right now? Do you think the interest with Dalvin? I'm not going to ask you. Tell me, Rich, is he signing? Because your name isn't Dalvin Cook, but I won't. But I do think that you might have an idea as to, do the Jets see Dalvin Cook as a cherry on top to what is already an established running back room, or is that someone they're kind of really looking into as a need, maybe for that championship caliber talent in that back room?
Well, to me, I think I don't want to say the ship has sailed on Dalvin Cook, but it's kind of leaving the harbor right now. To use a nautical analogy, there, the Jets feel pretty comfortable with their running back depth. I think you saw on Saturday in Carolina, Michael Carter and Izzy ran well. Not so much Bam Knight, but I actually think Bam Knight's been probably the most impressive out of the three in the practices that I've watched. So they got three guys. To me, the decision comes down to, where really is Brees Hall? Now, the Jets give you this very optimistic, oh, we think he's trending toward opening day, all that stuff. Look at the reality here. He's coming off an ACL last October. They're running out of practice days. They have 6 practice days left in the preseason, and then a couple of more. They have about 9 or 10 practices left before the season starts. If he doesn't come back really soon, like when is he going to get ready for week 1? So that's something I hope to find out this week when we're out at practice, because if he's not activated from PUP in the next couple of days, then I don't know if he'll play in the preseason. And if he doesn't play in the preseason, I think it would be highly questionable to play him in the regular season unless he needs to get banged around a little bit. So I would say they're comfortable with their depth right now based on the thought that Brees Hall will be back for week 1. But the next few days are going to be very telling.
We've gotten very logistical about the green team, I think, and I would like to pull it back a little bit to more of kind of a personal note. You won the Bob Oates Award in 2019. The Pro Football Writers of America awarded you that kind of for the excellent, just the pinnacle of beat reporting, kind of just in football in general. And with that, I would just kind of like to ask, what's the one thing that's the mundane day to day of football, of the game, that you just love so much compared to everybody else?
Yeah, that's another good question. The mundane, there is a lot of mundane stuff, that goes from day to day to day. And I look for, I like to be a storyteller. So, I mean, I like X's and O's for sure. Like, I have my Next Gen Stats subscription, and you could spend hours on there charting the dots moving around the screen. And look, I'm as guilty as anyone. I'll raise my hand and say, I tweet out the dots sometimes and all these crazy stats. I get it. There's a appetite for that, but at our core and at my core, I think I just try to be a storyteller. So I'm always looking for human interest stories, the personalities we cover. Those are really, I think, and I wouldn't even call them mundane. To me, it's interesting. And so I think that's what's kept me going so long, year after year. Like this year, to me, Aaron Rodgers he might be the most interesting guy in the league, just on his background, his personality. He's got some quirky habits. We know that for sure. They've been well documented. To me, he's really, really a fascinating guy. So you're going to see a lot of stories from me this year trying to explore the different sides of Aaron Rodgers.
Love it. And I love what you said about the mundane not being mundane to you. I think, I feel similarly about, for me, it's basketball.
Mhm.
But the day-to-day doldrums of practice and like that, I love it all. So I I can not relate fully because it's a different sport, but I really appreciate the passion. And I do have to say, I know we're on air, but you deserve the flowers that it comes through in your coverage.
Thank
And
you.
that it
I
shows in
don't
your
think I would have
coverage.
lasted 35 years if everything seemed mundane. Nothing's better than game day though. I will.
Yeah.
I mean, getting up on a Sunday morning and driving to the stadium and just listening to the radio, the fans calling in, and excited, and that that's like the best part. I mean, during the week, sometimes, it drags a little bit, depending on how the team's doing, but game days are cool. And this year, I've got one of the best stories in the NFL, the Jets and the Rodgers. So I'm lucky to be where I am right now.
Absolutely. Well, Rich, I'm going to take you back to the gridiron for a second because there's another positional group I'm quite interested in, and I know you'd have insight on it. Maybe even to another aspect of it as well. I'm talking tackles, right? Offensive tackles. That is maybe Dalvin news aside, the group with the biggest question mark on it. Personally, I love a good story. And a Mekhi Becton, starting emergence, comeback, if you want to call it that, after the struggles with just physical shape over the last couple years, I think would be the best story. And so that's what I'll be rooting for here in my little corner. But give me a dose of reality. What's it looking like at the tackle position? How do the Jets feel as an organization with that position right now? Do they feel Super Bowl ready there with what they've got? Because I don't know if with the camp reps from Mitchell and yeah.
It's a big question mark. Chris, you're definitely right on the money there. That's to me, it's the biggest threat to this whole Aaron Rodgers experiment and championship pursuit. They totally expect Dwayne Brown to be their left tackle on opening day. He's not practicing yet. We know that. Probably will start in the next week or so. Going to be 38 years old coming up real soon, coming off a shoulder operation. Probably got some conditioning issues he's going through, but they absolutely expect him to be their left tackle. So that doesn't leave Mekhi Becton anywhere. It leaves him on the bench, quite honestly. And I love Mekhi. Mekhi's a great story. If he could somehow make it back, it'll be as a backup to start the year. But who's to say he won't become a starter at some point? There are always injuries on the offensive line. You never keep your same five guys together the whole year. And so at the other tackle, it's either going to be Mitchell or Billy Turner, which to me is not the sexiest of options. If I had to guess right now, I'd probably say Billy Turner has a slight edge just because of Nathaniel Hackett's comfort level with Billy Turner. They were together in Green Bay and Denver. He loves the guy. To me, he's a journeyman type guy, but Max Mitchell has not established himself yet. So I think you're looking at Billy Turner at right tackle. I think they're okay at guard with AVT and Tomlinson. McGovern's their center. By default, essentially, they were really hoping that Joe Tippmann would make a strong run. That hasn't happened yet. Maybe at some point during the year it happens, but right now I think McGovern's experience is something that Rodgers really likes. So they're going to do whatever Aaron wants. So yeah, I mean, if your tackles are not functioning at a high level, you're going to have problems on offense, and I think it's a legitimate concern.
You'd think it's been extra tough on Tippmann and even rookies in general in camp, knowing the level of team they're stepping up to at the pro level, not just going from college to the pros, but going from college to, maybe a team that wasn't a contender, maybe a team that won every single game they played, but to go to the pro level at this level of expectation. Do you think that's been tough on guys like Tippmann? Even you want to look at a Will McDonald has been killing it on the defensive end, but have you sensed the pressure there, or do you think this team's kind of united?
Yeah, no, I don't sense that at all. It's really a good thing. I mean, if this were 2 years ago in Salah's first year, those guys like Tippmann, I don't want to say he'd be the starting center because they had McGovern then too, but players of Tippmann's ilk, there'd be so many more opportunities to play because that team was basically starting over 2 years ago. Now, the team is not starting over. They're expected to compete and contend for a title. And so it's okay. I mean, you want some of your draft picks to contribute. And I think McDonald will contribute on a rotational basis on the defensive line. Tippmann, if you're a backup center, you do a tiny bit on special teams, maybe on the PAT and field goal teams. That's about it. So they're probably, and Izzy could be the third back. They'll probably dress only 3 on game day. So if Breece Hall comes back, Izzy would probably be the odd man out. So there's a lot of different ways it could go. So right now you're saying this draft is really not helping the team that much, but you also have to consider the team. It's the talent base of the team is higher than it was 2 years ago.
Rich, you talked about in 2 answers ago, you kind of talking about how you're a storyteller, and that's kind of how you like to frame your point of view kind of throughout the season. And a guy that I see on this Jet roster, with I think has the most storytelling potential, I guess I would call it, and just the most I don't know, just the most interesting guy to me in this entire picture is a young man from BYU by the name of Zach Wilson. I see on Twitter you post his stats and what he's doing in camp, and that they're good numbers, but pump the brakes. He's not making any Patrick Mahomes plays out here. My question for you is just kind of from a broad perspective: should Jet fans be throwing away their Wilson jersey? Should they be sending them to Goodwill, or should they be holding on to them? Basically, like, what do you think?
Depends how patient the fans you're talking about are. Look, Zach Wilson is not going to be the Jets starting quarterback for at least 2 years. I definitely get the impression that Rodgers is going to stick around for at least 2, maybe 3. Who knows? So I don't see Zach Wilson ever being the Jets starting quarterback again. Now, could he play this year? Might he have to start a game or 2? Oh, of course, there's always that possibility. But he's only got 2 years left on his contract, and the time Rodgers leaves, he's going to be a free agent. And so how do you keep a guy like that? So it's a very complex issue. I think Zach's been handling it really well. He's accepted his role. Not that he had any choice in the matter. I mean, it's freaking Aaron Rodgers. It's not like they're bringing in another a young kid. So he's accepted his role. I think he's learning. I think he's developing very slowly. You're seeing like little bits of progress, like in the last game against Carolina, some little bits, little steps that he's taking, which is positive. But Zach Wilson's going to have to make a decision after this year as well. If he may go to the, and I'm not saying I know this, but maybe he goes to the Jets and says, look, appreciate what you've done for me, but I want a chance to go out there and start, so I'm requesting a trade. That wouldn't shock me if that happened. It also wouldn't shock me if the Jets are the ones who say, hey, maybe we should trade him now so we don't lose him as a free agent in a year. So these are all decisions that both sides are going to have to make. How patient will Zach Wilson be? And but yeah, it's a like you said, Chris, it's a good story. It's an interesting story, but the Jets hope right now that he never has to play it down, because that would be something bad for Aaron Rodgers. So a very interesting story, but one that I think has future ramifications way down the road.
Rich, one final question, and this one is entering silly season, so you can take the thinking cap off. And Broadway, Aaron Rodgers and his teammates, Uzoma, Tim Boyle, Solomon Thomas, had a little visit with the cast of Chicago on Broadway. Now, there's a little mention recently on Hard Knocks, the D-line, talking about plays and musicals. Do you think this is something that could come from the land of the unlikely to help bond these Jets together in kind of like we talked about earlier, the face of all this pressure? They kind of need to come out and be a good team. They kind of need to come out and be gelled and cohesive. These are things that are not typical for teams just assembled. Do you see something for real with this Broadway and just overall the teams? This is my soapbox to ask about the teams off the field bonding regardless, but talk to me about Chicago.
Yeah, well, I know I don't. That's news to me that they went to Chicago. I know they've been to Wicked. They went to some of them went to the Tony Awards. I think the connection there is CJ Uzama. CJ has some investment in Broadway. I think maybe in Wicked, I want to say maybe CJ Uzama was like a financial backer. So he's obviously got some Broadway connections and was able to invite a bunch of teammates out. I love it. I think it's great. I think there is something to that, to like bonding off the field, getting to know people off the field. You saw Rodgers at hockey games, Knicks games, Taylor Swift, although I don't know if he was with any teammates at the Taylor Swift concert. But I think stuff like that is great. is it going to win them a championship? That's not going to win them a championship, but it's good for locker room morale to see their quarterback out with them, hanging out. Sauce Gardner and Rodgers have developed, a really interesting friendship to me. They went out to dinner downtown.
When are you getting a chain, Rich?
Yeah, I know. Me, yeah. I'm not going to hold my breath on that one, but I thought Rodgers handled that extremely well. Obviously, that's not his style, but he loved the chain. Probably some hard knocks situation. I mean, that might have been the driving force behind it as well. So,
But Rich, isn't it from one perspective, isn't that his style? Like to be seen and to be out there? Like I feel like it almost is very much him. Like maybe not in the
Rodgers.
same style, but I think when we think about just from a principle standpoint, I think that they match up very well.
Yeah, I think Rodgers obviously likes to be out in public and seen. I think also there was a public relations element to that as well,
Yeah,
because if you
of course.
recall, when this whole Rodgers rumor thing started back in February, I don't think Jet fans were like head over heels in love with the idea of getting Aaron Rodgers. In fact, I did a Twitter survey, I think in early March. I said, who do you want as a Jet fan? Do you want Rodgers, Derek Carr, or Jimmy Garoppolo? I got like 8,000 votes. And Carr edged Rodgers. It was like
Wow.
50% to 45 to 5 for Garoppolo. So because the perception of Rodgers was he's a diva, he doesn't show up for the offseason workouts. So I think Rodgers and whoever was advising him did a great job of changing the narrative. He goes to every workout. He's all over town at the Knicks games, the Tony Awards. He's doing great press conferences. He's been phenomenal in the press. He takes a $35 million pay cut. I mean, who does that? So he's played it perfectly, and he's won over the fan base.
I won't joke that James Harden took a pay cut because we saw this morning how that aged.
Yeah.
Rich, I'll let you go now. We want to thank you so much for joining us here on One on One. Chris had a great time interviewing you. And honestly, just thank you for being willing to share your perspective. We know you work really hard to get this perspective and observe everything at camp. So you being willing to come here and sum it up, it means a lot to us. Thank you, Rich.
Well, thank you, Chris Squared. And I had a really good time, and thanks for reaching out. And let's check back later on in the year and see how it's going.
Well, mid-season update. Stay with us here on One on One. We'll be right back.